In the last several hours, attention across Washington, the Middle East, and global security circles has turned once again towards Syria. According to U.S. officials, American forces carried out targeted military strikes against ISIS-linked positions inside Syrian territory. The operation, described as precise and limited in scope, was aimed at disrupting active threats and preventing future attacks against U.S. personnel and allied forces operating in the region. Officials emphasized that this action was not part of a new large-scale military campaign, but rather a continuation of the long-standing mission to degrade and ultimately eliminate ISIS networks that continue to operate in remote and unstable areas. Despite the group's loss of territorial control years ago, intelligence agencies have consistently warned that ISIS remains capable of organizing attacks, recruiting fighters, and exploiting regional instability. Sources familiar with the operation say the strikes were conducted after actionable intelligence identified ISIS operatives planning activities that posed an imminent risk. The targets reportedly included weapons storage sites, logistical hubs, and movement corridors used by extremist cells to coordinate operations. Military planners stressed that the strikes were designed to minimize civilian harm while delivering a clear message to terrorist networks. The Pentagon has repeatedly stated that ISIS, though weakened, has not been defeated. In areas where governance is fragile and conflict continues, extremist groups often find opportunities to regroup. Syria, still dealing with the aftermath of years of civil war, remains one of those environments. U.S. commanders have warned that abandoning pressure on ISIS too early could allow the group to rebuild its operational capabilities. American officials also highlighted that these strikes were conducted in coordination with regional partners and allies. Cooperation with local forces has been a cornerstone of U.S. counterterrorism strategy in Syria and Iraq. Rather than deploying large numbers of American troops, the United States has focused on intelligence sharing, air support, and training efforts designed to empower partners on the ground. This latest operation comes amid a broader conversation in Washington about U.S. involvement in the Middle East. While there is strong public fatigue after decades of conflict, there is also bipartisan agreement that allowing terrorist groups to reemerge unchecked could create greater security risks in the long run. Lawmakers from both parties have emphasized the importance of maintaining the capability to act swiftly when threats arise. Military analysts say the strike underscores how modern counterterrorism operations differ from past wars. Instead of sustained bombing campaigns or large troop deployments, today's actions often involve brief targeted missions based on real-time intelligence. The goal is disruption rather than occupation, keeping extremist networks off balance and unable to plan large-scale attacks. Officials were careful to note that the operation was defensive in nature. According to statements released after the strikes, the United States does not seek escalation with state or non-state actors in the region. Instead, the focus remains on protecting U.S. personnel, safeguarding allies, and preventing ISIS from exploiting chaos. The regional context adds another layer of complexity. Syria remains a crowded battlefield with multiple actors operating in close proximity. U.S. forces must carefully manage risks to avoid unintended confrontations while still maintaining pressure on terrorist organizations. Defense officials say deconfliction channels and strict rules of engagement are essential to preventing broader conflict. For Americans at home, events like these often raise questions about why U.S. forces are still active in Syria. National security officials argue that the mission is about prevention. By disrupting terrorist cells abroad, they believe the United States reduces the likelihood of attacks against Americans and U.S. interests overseas. Experts point out that ISIS has shown resilience in the past. Even after suffering major defeats, the group has adapted by shifting tactics, relying on small cells, and using online propaganda to inspire followers. Countering this threat requires constant vigilance, intelligence cooperation, and the ability to act quickly when warning signs appear. The Biden administration, like administrations before it, has faced the challenge of balancing restraint with readiness. While there is a desire to avoid open-ended military commitments, there is also recognition that extremist threats do not disappear simply because they are no longer dominating headlines. Officials also stress that the strikes should not be interpreted as a change in U.S. policy. The broader strategy remains focused on counterterrorism, regional stability, and diplomatic engagement where possible. Military action, they say, is used only when necessary and based on clear threat assessments. In recent months, U.S. commanders have warned that ISIS has attempted to exploit regional tensions and conflicts to expand its influence. Areas with weak security, displaced populations, and limited economic opportunity can become fertile ground for radicalization. Preventing this requires not only military pressure, but also humanitarian assistance and long-term stabilization efforts. The operation has drawn international attention, with allies closely watching how the United States manages its role in Syria. Some view the strike as a reminder that, despite shifting global priorities, counterterrorism remains a core component of U.S. national security policy. Defense analysts note that air and precision strikes remain one of the most effective tools against dispersed terrorist networks. When paired with accurate intelligence, they can disrupt leadership, destroy resources, and force militants into hiding. However, experts also caution that military force alone cannot eliminate extremist ideology. Within hours of reports of the strike, discussions began across social media and news platforms. Supporters argue that decisive action sends a strong deterrent message, while critics question the long-term effectiveness of repeated military operations. This debate reflects a broader national conversation about America's role in global security. Pentagon officials reiterated that protecting American service members is a top priority. Any threat to U.S. forces, they say, will be met with appropriate and proportionate action. This principle has guided U.S. military posture in the region for years and continues to shape decision-making. The situation on the ground in Syria remains fluid. While ISIS no longer controls large swaths of territory, its presence continues to challenge regional security. Intelligence assessments suggest that continued pressure is necessary to prevent the group from reorganizing and launching coordinated attacks. For many Americans, these developments may feel distant, but policymakers argue that global security threats often have direct consequences at home. History has shown that ignoring extremist movements abroad can lead to tragic outcomes later. From this perspective, targeted actions are seen as a form of prevention. As more details emerge, officials are expected to brief lawmakers and allies on the results of the operation. Transparency, they say, is important for maintaining public trust and ensuring accountability. At the same time, certain operational details remain classified to protect sources and methods. This latest strike serves as a reminder that the fight against terrorism is not confined to one moment in time. It is an ongoing effort that requires adaptability, cooperation, and sustained attention. While the nature of the threat has changed, the underlying challenge remains. In Washington, the focus now turns to what comes next. Military leaders will assess the impact of the operation, monitor ISIS activity, and determine whether additional actions are needed. Diplomatic channels will continue to play a role as the United States works with partners to promote stability. Ultimately, officials say the goal is simple: to ensure that ISIS and similar groups never regain the ability to threaten the United States or its allies. While there are no easy solutions, they believe that targeted, intelligence-driven operations remain one of the most effective tools available. As the story continues to develop, Americans are once again reminded of the complex and often unseen efforts that go into maintaining national security. Far from the headlines, decisions are being made every day to balance risk, responsibility, and restraint in an unpredictable world.